$18,500 fine with no evidence. Jasmine's epic courtroom battle. $18,500. No hearing. No evidence. Just a piece of paper signed by a judge with too much power and too little patience. That's how it all began. In the heart of Miami, on a sweltering morning at the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida, a shocking decision echoed through the courtroom. Judge Robert Holloway, known for his cold demeanor and inflexible stance, imposed a staggering fine on attorney Jasmine Crockett. No chance to object. No arguments heard. As if she were just another name on his long list of unilateral rulings. But Jasmine was not just another one. A former federal prosecutor, specializing in civil rights. She knew exactly where she was, and more importantly, who she was facing. She didn't protest immediately. She didn't yell. She just stood still, her gaze fixed, unreadable. A silence that said everything. A silence not of acceptance, but of preparation. He thought she would fold. He didn't know Jasmine Crockett. As Judge Holloway's pen tapped the bench with barely restrained irritation, Jasmine slowly clicked her pen shut over the fine papers. A subtle move, yet charged with intent. Two attorneys in the gallery exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered, barely audible, "This is illegal." Outside, the courthouse's bronze plaque gleamed under the sun with detached formality. United States District Court, Southern District of Florida. But inside that room, something extraordinary was about to unfold. The courtroom didn't know it yet, but was about to witness not just a legal challenge, but a direct confrontation against the abuse of authority disguised as legality. In this courtroom, it wasn't just justice on the line. It was the very idea that someone could be silenced simply for daring to resist. And Jasmine Crockett was never one to accept unfounded orders. She walked into that room ready to fight, and she wouldn't leave without being heard. Robert Holloway had occupied his judge's chair for 27 years. A feared name in Miami's legal circles, revered by some, avoided by many. The kind of man who spoke little but decided much. Over his long career, 82% of his rulings favored the government. A number his supporters saw as firmness, but critics viewed as a troubling sign of bias. Holloway built a reputation for rigidity, driven by a strict interpretation of the law, and political convenience that often went unspoken. It was in his courtroom that attorney Jasmine Crockett was summoned, not as someone's defender, but as the target of an unprecedented administrative charge. To an outsider, it looked like just another routine proceeding. But Jasmine knew it reeked of retaliation. She wasn't new to this. At 38, she had already made her mark as a federal prosecutor, having worked dozens of complex cases involving civil rights violations and police corruption. But her true breakthrough came when she left public service to defend citizens against the very system she once represented. She was a disruptive voice, and that made her dangerous. The fine made no sense. No hearing was scheduled. No formal subpoena. Just a terse letter, signed by Holloway, notifying her the penalty and demanding immediate payment. The amount, $18,500. The justification, disrespectful conduct during a prior hearing, a hearing in which Jasmine hadn't even directly participated. Outside the court, the bronze plaque that proudly displayed the institution's name seemed to mock its mission, equal justice under law. Inside, the scales of justice tilted under the weight of a judge's ego, who refused to be questioned. Jasmine entered that courtroom with steady steps, not arrogant, but assured. She wore a charcoal gray suit, understated yet sharp. She knew every move she made would be scrutinized. She knew she was facing a figure used to winning by exhaustion. But she also knew one more thing. No one, not even a federal judge, is above the Constitution. And if anyone had the courage and preparation to prove it, it was her. When the hearing began, Jasmine got straight to the point. She requested access to the evidence that justified the fine. The assigned prosecutor, Thomas Wright, hesitated for a second, just long enough to be noticed. He looked down at the papers before him, then at Judge Holloway, and finally replied with a vague answer. The violation is duly recorded in the officer's report. Jasmine wasn't satisfied. Which report? She asked, her tone calm. I need to see the original documentation, not a summary. Wright swallowed hard. The judge furrowed his brow. as if the request were a personal inconvenience. Holloway then spoke, dripping with disdain. "Counselor Crockett, this court is not here to revisit matters already decided. The sanction has been imposed. You can either comply or face additional consequences." But Jasmine didn't back down. She rose slowly, picked up a civil procedure code, and cited precisely the right to due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. Then she turned to the prosecutor and repeated the question, now with more force. "Where's the report? Where's the footage? Where are the witnesses?" That's when the tension broke. Wright finally admitted that the fine was based solely on a verbal account by Officer Daniel Shaw, who claimed to have witnessed inappropriate conduct by Jasmine at a previous hearing. But there was no recording, no formal transcript. No one else confirmed the incident. Silence overtook the courtroom. The sound of Judge Holloway's pen tapping against the bench became the only audible noise. Rhythmic, irritated, uneasy. Jasmine looked around. The faces in the courtroom showed discomfort. Some attorneys whispered among themselves. Others simply watched, alert, as if they knew something extraordinary was about to happen. She then calmly turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a federal courtroom, not a theater for unscripted accusations. If there's a violation, prove it. If not, take the performance off the stage." From that moment on, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed. Jasmine's demand for evidence wasn't just a legal challenge. It was a direct provocation to Holloway's authority. And he felt it. The judge straightened his posture, tightened his lips, and issued a threat that, for many, would have meant the end of any attempt to resist. "Counselor, one more word in that tone, and I will consider your conduct contempt of court." But Jasmine didn't blink, didn't step back. On the contrary, she picked up a thick volume, already marked with sticky notes, and slowly raised it before the court. "Matthews versus Eldridge, United States Supreme Court, 1976, she began. "Due process of law requires, at the very least, adequate notice and the opportunity to be heard before the imposition of any administrative penalty. I was not notified. I was not heard. This is a clear violation of the Due Process Clause." There was no arrogance in her voice, only conviction, clarity, and above all, courage. Jasmine knew that confronting a federal judge this way was uncommon. She understood the risk, but frankly, she didn't seem to care, because what was at stake for her was bigger than a fine. It was the integrity of the system itself. In the gallery, the murmurs began. Lawyers whispered with increasing intensity. Two public defenders were scribbling notes furiously. Something was happening that went beyond this case. It was as if Jasmine was voicing a collective outrage, long silenced by the cold rituals of federal justice. And frankly, she was right. Because what Holloway did, tried to impose a financial sanction without the right to defense, based solely on a police officer's word, isn't just legally questionable. It's morally indefensible. It's the kind of abuse that erodes public trust in the judiciary. And it's exactly the kind of conduct that must be confronted by voices like Jasmine's. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending everyone's right to be heard before being punished. And that's the bare minimum any real democracy should guarantee. The turning point came with surgical precision. With the courtroom in absolute silence, Jasmine walked the bench and requested permission to present new evidence. Holloway, visibly impatient, granted it with a curt gesture. She then opened her laptop, connected it to the courtroom projector, and displayed a screenshot from Officer Daniel Shaw's body camera, the very person whose verbal testimony was the sole basis of the accusation. The frozen image showed the exact date and time of the alleged violation. But there was one irrefutable detail. Jasmine wasn't there. Not in the room. Not even nearby. The footage clearly showed the inside of the courtroom where she supposedly acted inappropriately. The chair designated for the defense attorney was empty. The officer was alone, arguing with someone else. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. Prosecutor Wright looked down. Holloway clenched his hands tightly, as if trying to contain something more than just frustration. Jasmine looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, this is conclusive proof that this fine was based on a false report, and that this court acted without verifying the facts." Holloway, pale, called for an immediate recess. He stood and left the courtroom under stunned, and in some faces, almost satisfied expressions. For the first time in years, Judge Robert Holloway was publicly rattled in his own courtroom. That's when the unexpected happened. Judge Aaron Pierce, seated as an observer, calmly stood and approached the bench. With a firm but respectful tone, he asked aloud, "Where's the legality in this proceeding? If even the factual basis doesn't hold up?" It was as if someone had turned on a light in a room where everyone had been pretending to see. The case was now unraveling, and the country would soon see everything. When the court returned from recess, the mood was completely different. What had started as a routine hearing, full of predictable formalities, had now become an event of national weight. Cameras were already waiting outside. Legal blogs began covering the case in real time. The word abuse was starting to trend across social media, a spark ready to ignite public opinion. Back in the room, Judge Aaron Pierce's presence shifted the balance of power. He now temporarily presided over the session, with Holloway absent due to administrative reasons, according to the court officer. But everyone knew the truth. The pressure had finally broken through the wall of denial. Pierce opened the session with precision. He asked Prosecutor Wright to justify the fine in light of the new evidence. The prosecutor tried to argue that there might have been a case of mistaken identity, that the video could be incomplete. Jasmine then requested permission to show the full footage. The result, 2 minutes and 34 seconds of devastating clarity, and at no point did Jasmine appear. Not once. There was no questionable conduct. Shaw lied, and the court accepted the lie as truth. From that moment, the facts took over. Judge Pierce called for an extraordinary vote with 2 other district judges present as observers, an unusual but permissible measure in cases involving potential judicial misconduct. The decision was unanimous. The fine was overturned. More than that, the court ordered an immediate formal investigation into Officer Shaw's conduct and Judge Holloway's behavior in the case. The final scene of the hearing was symbolic. Robert Holloway, now back in the room, listened in silence to the verdict. When the session was adjourned, he stood slowly and left the courtroom without looking at anyone, like a man realizing, perhaps for the first time, that his power is not absolute. Across the room, Jasmine was surrounded by colleagues and reporters. She smiled, but her expression remained calm and focused. When asked how she felt, she answered firmly, "This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever been silenced by a system that forgot what justice means." The final images of the video showed Jasmine Crockett leaving the courthouse, surrounded by microphones, cameras, and phones. Her figure, until then known only within legal circles, now took on the shape of a symbol. Within minutes, her name was trending on social media. The hashtag #JusticeWithJasmine topped the trending topics, alongside personal testimonies, denunciations, and messages of support from across the country. But the impact went beyond the online buzz. Within 48 hours, investigative media outlets began publishing dossiers on Judge Holloway's past rulings. It was discovered that the fine against Jasmine wasn't an isolated incident. At least 19 professionals had received similar sanctions, always through summary decisions, without concrete evidence. For the first time in decades, the system began to look inward, pressured by a woman who refused to bow her head. On screen, the video displays the sentence. In the last 5 years, over 12,000 federal fines were overturned due to procedural violations. Then, a question appears in white letters over a black background. Have you ever received an unfair fine? Share your story in the comments. The final message is clear. This isn't just an isolated case. It's a warning, a call to action. The video ends with a direct invitation. Support transparency in the justice system. Sign the petition for federal fine reform. Link in the description. And so, what began as a quiet attempt at intimidation ended as the beginning of a movement. Because justice isn't just what's written in the law books. It's what we do with it when we have the courage to stand for it, like Jasmine did, and like many are now ready to do as well. The screen fades to black, and a soft music begins to play. The image of Jasmine walking out of the courthouse dissolves slowly as the following words appear. Now it's your turn. Then Jasmine's voice comes in, firm and inspiring. The system only changes when each of us decides to make a difference. If you care about truth, justice, and transparency, then you're already part of that change. Don't stay on the sidelines. The video shifts to a vibrant image of the channel's logo with the message, "Subscribe now. Join our fight for a fairer world." On screen, flashes of powerful moments from a video blend with new ones, as if inviting viewers to follow the next chapter in this journey of resistance. Her voice returns, now with a more personal tone. If you've made it this far, it's because you believe the power of justice cannot be silenced. So, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That's how you'll make sure not to miss the next story that will inspire you to stand up for what's right. The screen closes with a final thank you message. Thank you for being part of this change. See you next time.